Metroid as a franchise has now existed for over 35 years, and with 35 years of history, there are a lot of things that you may or may not know. I present to you the 10 things about the Metroid franchise. Number 10. Metroid is inspired by aliens. Metroid and the movie franchise, Alien, feels like they share a lot of similarities, such as both Metroids and Aliens feature a female protagonist. Samus' arch-nemesis, Ridley, shares the same name as Alien producer, Ridley Scott, and both take place in outer space, to name a few. Since the first game production, the team was heavily influenced by Alien at the time. Longtime series director Yoshio Sakamoto has this to say about the inspiration. I think the film Alien had a huge influence on the production of the first Metroid game. All of the team members were affected by H.R. Giger's design work, and I think they were aware that such designs would be a good match for the Metroid world we had already put in place. While music composer Hirokazu Tanaka wanted to replicate the feel of isolation and uneasiness that the Alien movies had, he said, "I was inspired by the first spaceships drifting in the darkness of space. I wasn't inspired by Alien's music, but I was fascinated by the sense of urgency, tension, and uneasiness that dominate the whole movie. I was affected by that mood of not knowing when something would happen." Number 9. Franchise was originally called Space Hunter before it was changed to Metroid. In a 2004 interview with the team on a Japanese magazine called Nintendo Dream, Yoshio Sakamoto and Hiroji Kiyotake chimed in about the name creation of Metroid. The team originally called the first game as Space Hunter, likely due to Samus being a bounty hunter in space, but eventually, they decided to rename the title by combining the words Metro and Android together. The Metro part is inspired by the game, looking like a labyrinth, almost like a metro station, being underground as well. And the Android part is how Samus in her suit looked like an android. Speaking of android, number 8. Samus was originally not a woman. In the making of Metroid, the team never envisioned Samus to be a woman until the very last minute. Sakamoto and the team at the time was more focused on the speedrunning aspect of the game, and so when the player cleared the game faster, the game would present a different ending as a reward. This eventually led to the discussion of having Samus take off her helmet as one of the reward tiers, and this went further with someone in the team to then suggest to make Samus a female this whole time, as a shock factor for the player whom they thought they were playing some macho man or robot this whole time. The team liked the idea enough to implement the idea straight away, and now the rest is history. Number 7. Samus Aran name was inspired by a soccer player. Samus Aran's name was inspired by a soccer player named Edison Arantes do Nascimento. I hope I pronounced it right. Otherwise known as Pell. That's where the Aran part of the name came from. As for Samus, that's still a mystery at the moment. Number 6. Varia suit is a mistranslation. The iconic Varia suit with his huge bulking shoulder pads was originally a mistranslation. The name was supposed to be Barrier suit instead, but translation back then was shoddy, and even though Barrier suit was written in katakana, a Japanese written language that is used for foreign words or non-Japanese origin words, the translator still went with Varia instead, as they likely thought it was some made-up word at the time. Number 5. Chozo name in Japanese mean bird people race. Well, that's not really true, but the Chozo, much like Metroid, is a combination of two words, but in Japanese instead, and the two words are Chojin and Zoku. Chojin stands for bird people, and Zoku stands for clan, race, tribe, or family. Number 4. Samus' height was originally 6 feet 3 inches. In the Super Metroid Nintendo's Player's Guide, Samus was confirmed to be a 6 foot 3 inches Amazoness warrior that weighs 198 pounds without her power suit. That's 191 centimeters and 90 kilograms in the metric system. This was very likely how tall and heavy Samus was originally supposed to be, but this is likely retconned in the future installments of the franchise, as she appears slimmer, shorter, and more feminine later on in the series, likely because Sakamoto wanted to depict Samus in a more vulnerable state. Number 3. Metro sold about 20 million in lifetime sales to date. With the release of Metroid Dread, Metroid's lifetime sale have finally hit 20 million sales. While it is nowhere near in terms of sales compared to Nintendo's Giganaut titles like Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon, it is still amazing for Metroid to still be alive and kicking despite such numbers. Most of Nintendo's franchises that have low numbers aren't so lucky. Looking at you, Star Fox and F-Zero. Having said that, Metroid does experience the occasional drought, such as from Super's release at 1994 to Fusion in 2002. A total of 8 years wait. All between Other M released in 2010 till Prime Federation Force in 2016 for a total of 6 years. Number 2. The original creator of Metroid is Gunpei Yokoi. Sakamoto was at the time just an artist for Metroid. These days, Sakamoto is viewed as the father of Metroid. But did you know, originally, Metroid was a project led by Gunpei Yokoi, the mentor of the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto. Yoshio Sakamoto at the time was working on another project called Kid Icarus, which later released on the same year as Zelda and Metroid. During the development, Sakamoto was brought over to the Metroid development team, due to the two teams being close to each other. Sakamoto then went on to lead and direct all other 2D Metroid games, including the famous Super Metroid. Honorable mention. Due to the development team of Metroid and Kid Icarus being close with each other, they were considered as sister franchise, but while Kid Icarus only flew to the skies, Metroid left its sister and soared into space. For those that don't understand the metaphor, Metroid left Kid Icarus behind to continue on as a franchise. Number 1. Metroid 64 was never made because no one felt confident following up after Super Metroid. Metroid as a franchise have only ever skipped 2 Nintendo home console, being the Nintendo 64 and the Nintendo Wii U. The Nintendo 64 was the first big step for gaming to transition from 2D to 3D, and that's where a lot of franchises sink or swim, with such examples like Mario 64 and Zelda Ocarina of Time swimming, and Nia Bubsy 3D and Earthworm Jim 3D sinking. This is what Sakamoto said about the possibility of Metroid 64 at the time. I was actually thinking about the possibility of making a Metroid game for Nintendo 64, but I felt that I shouldn't be the one making the game. When I held the Nintendo 64 controller in my hands, I just couldn't imagine how it could be used to move Samus around. So for me, it was just too early to personally make a 3D Metroid game. Nintendo at that time approached another company and asked them if they would make a Nintendo 64 version of Metroid. They turned it down, saying that unfortunately they did not have the confidence to create a Nintendo 64 Metroid game that could compare favorably with Super Metroid. That's something I take as a compliment to what we achieved with Super Metroid. So Sakamoto didn't develop Metroid 64 at the time because he couldn't imagine how Samus would transition into a 3D environment. And it's safe to say he's still uncomfortable with such idea to this day, as the closest 3D Metroid game he directed was Metroid Other M. And we know how fans like that one. What is interesting is how Nintendo approached another company to make Metroid 64, but they ultimately reject the offer since they feel like it's too hard to follow up after Super Metroid, which is to this day still considered by many fans as the best Metroid game. That's it for this list. How many did you already know on this list? Which one you didn't know? Let me know down in the comments below and slap the subscribe button for more Metroid related content in the future. Bye for now.